Hello, my name is Nick Capone, and this is Cultural Catholicism, an exploration into the existence and significance of the Catholic faith within the culture. Today, I'm speaking with Anthony D'Ambrosio. He is a Catholic filmmaker. He is the co founder of a group called Catholic Creatives. He's co founder of his consulting company, Sherwood Fellows, along with his brother. He's most significantly, the writer and director of the film Triumph of the Heart. This is a movie that covers the final hours of St. Maximilian Kolbe and how he um, transformed the hearts of those around him, how he inspired hope, and how he made the ultimate act of love. Uh, um, Covered very important um, topics involving the film industry and this film in particular. We talked about who Kolbe was, um, Anthony's journey in the faith, um, which is honestly pretty dramatic, and how that led to his inspiration to make this movie, what went into the making of it. We talk about the collapse of storytelling in Hollywood and how important it is for uh, um, the next generation of Catholic creatives to basically find a new way to make movies. We and he gives a he's trailblazing to do that, but he also kind of gives some advice on how Catholics can go about that. And we talk about the recent attacks from some Catholics on Kolbe's legacy and the claim that he never actually he wasn't a martyr. And Anthony shares his insights on that claim. And uh, finally, because I'm not sure if this is mentioned in the interview, but really, this film needs support. If you feel called to do that and you're interested in it, go to triumphoftheheart.com, and there you can get tickets. You can try to schedule a screening. You can donate. The work that he's doing is truly, I believe, heaven's work, and it's immeasurably important in the battle for the imagination, the hearts, and the souls of all of us. So, without saying anything more, here's a conversation. Hope you enjoy. Anthony, thank you for your time. Thank you for being here to talk with me today.
Thanks, Nick. Super grateful to be here and to be on the podcast.
So, there's a lot to go over, and I want to dive right in. Who was Saint Maximilian Kolbe?
Yeah, so St. Maximilian Kolbe, many people know about his story. At least I'm assuming most of the people who are listening to the podcast have at least tangentially heard about him. He's a Polish saint during World War II who was basically the Bishop Barron of his era. He was the first Catholic to really see and exploit the opportunity of mass media for evangelization. He had a subscription network platform for his newspaper that was over 1 million people in Poland before the war, and he really founded it to sort of combat the culture of death that was plaguing Europe at the time. And ultimately, though, that all of that was turned to dust during the invasion of Poland, and he was brought to Auschwitz because he was one of the political leaders that was seen as not being friendly to the Nazis. And during his time in Auschwitz, he volunteered to take another man's place in a starvation bunker and starve to death with 9 other men. In doing so, leading them in songs and prayers and using their voices to remind the rest of the camp of their humanity and of their culture. And so the film that I'm producing and making is really about that part of his story, his passion, if you will, the last 14 days of his life, and his relationships bringing those 9 other men into kind of a rebellion of hope in the darkest place on earth.
So, what inspired you to make a movie about him? Um, and um, did you always want to make movies? Was this something that the Lord just called you to? Kind of what was the story to getting to where you're at?
Yeah, I actually was not on my radar to make films growing up. I was a homeschooled kid, and we actually didn't have lots of media. You know, I of course saw the greatest hits, um, and was inspired by movies, but they were just like so far out of reach. I could never have imagined, you know, making something that was worthwhile. But I wrote. I was a big writer, and writing has always been one of the ways that God um, has shaped my own heart. And I went to seminary. I came out of that with a philosophy degree and launched myself into ministry and had a chronic illness that materialized right as I was about to get engaged, and um, it really kind of upended my entire life. And one of the symptoms of it was chronic insomnia. During the nights where I would be up alone all night, I found myself really having dialogues with God that were very like angry, and I was in the process of really losing my faith when I found a detail in Colby's story when I was on a Wikipedia page that I had never heard before, and that was that um, I had always heard that he had survived for 14 days without food or water, and that he had to be um, injected and killed because of how much trouble sort of he was causing um, with his, you know, sort of his stand, just sort of being committed to not dying and to singing songs out of that cell. I was like, wow, that's very dramatic. But what was more dramatic to me and more interesting was that he actually was able to bring three other men into that, I guess, into that with him. That three other men had survived for 14 days with him, which of course that's a miracle that he survived. But if he was able to do that for these other men, then he was able to bring them into a place of hope, into a place of meaning, into a place of redemption, even though they were their lives were cut short in a very meaningless, terrible, terrifying way. Perhaps one of the most terrifying deaths that a man could exact upon another man. And so that hit me like a ton of bricks because it was a story that I really needed, and that I understood how miraculous that was given the circumstances that I was living through. And I began to sort of find myself having these imaginary Lectio Divina type conversations with Kolbe um, at night to get me through. And I began to write them, and that materialized into this script that was a short film, and then ultimately the feature film that we're here talking about today. And so the journey to making it wasn't really a journey. I think during that time, at some point, I made the decision that I really wanted to direct film. Perhaps it was actually during the directing of the short film that I realized that there was a calling there for me. But the it wasn't something that was really on my radar really until this project.
I think you were you Cradle Catholic?
Yeah, I grew up homeschooled conservative Catholic, and you know went uh to private Catholic college. So yeah,
So was this I think there's a lot of Cradle Catholics who experience when you hit this point of profound suffering, and I think we all do in one way or another, probably also in the window of time in life that you did. And I can absolutely see how it can be crippling. I mean, I've had my own, particular, we all have our heaviest cross, and it can crush you if you're not totally open to carrying it. Um, so would you say that this experience with Colby and this transformation, this renewal of hope, was this when you're, because the way I think about it for myself, again, being cradle Catholic, is I can remember a moment where I kind of like my childhood faith died. Like it ran its course, and there was like a leap I had to make onto my adult faith. And the foundation was there, which is why I didn't fall away. But there was a moment of like a passing over to this new season. Would you say that was what that was for you?
Yeah, it's a very, very astute question, and it's one that takes a certain uh, familiarity with the mystical kind of journey to be able to answer. I think that you're right, that it is actually a rather universal thing, even if a lot of people don't know how to put it to words. Although, there is I definitely find that those who grew up cradle Catholic, but particularly those who grew up very serious, about their faith and who were pursuing it with kind of a gnawing intensity, got into ministry, etc. Um, there's a when you've dedicated your life to the thing and it's the organizational principle of your life, the death of that is incredibly profound and um, the suffering and the fear and the disorientation can be very crippling, and it certainly was for me. But I think the the beauty is that like our faith actually can really embrace those. We have a tradition that can embrace those dark nights of the soul and offer um, a meaning, spiritual purpose, like a intellectual honesty, um, all of that on the other side. And that certainly was that moment for me where uh, everything that I had stood for and believed about God and understood about God had to die and um, go through a furnace that ultimately brought me to a much more perhaps mystically connected and mature place in my faith. Um, Certainly one that was like much more open-handed and centered in the mystery of God, and in my own kind of humility and not understanding Him and His ways. But yeah, I think Colby's image was actually the thing that helped me to make that leap.
I feel like the saints do reach out to us. I know like the saints that I have devotions to have like reached out intentionally in my life, in quiet, subtle ways, and I think it's just incredible. It's so clear when you've experienced that to realize they are absolutely alive. They are with us and they are reaching out to help. Um, Now, you said that you never really had a drive or a thought to enter into film. Okay, so you make that decision and discern, oh, maybe I want to direct this. Um, that's a huge, I mean, most people think I want to be a director, and that might be a lifelong journey. What was that like for you going from this place of again of this place of healing then to like I'm gonna actually go make something? What was that like?
Yeah, so what was actually really interesting was that in the very middle of that healing journey, like I honestly was not even like I was living my faith and I was acting as a Catholic and perhaps was like willing to own it publicly, but still inside did not feel like I was Catholic at all. Like I was, I think the journey back to sort of a centeredness in the faith took perhaps 8 years. So this was in the middle of that, where some work had been done in secret, but um, I was contracted by the Diocese of Dallas Young Adult office to help them with a marketing and strategy for an event that they were doing in the center of Dallas that was like a an arts festival, South by Southwest flavored type evangelical outreach to young adults who were unchurched or dechurched in the diocese. And uh, I pitched them the idea of centering it on the reasons why people leave their faith. And as we were doing Barna studies and kind of or as we were digging into the research, um, it materialized very quickly that like you would think that perhaps all the hot button topics that are political are the things that would be um, the causes of disassociation, but really it had a lot more to do with the data was showing that it had a lot more to do with people's ability to make sense of suffering and doubt and and frankly their ability to have conversations about those things inside of the church environment. Um, and so I was like, we could dramatize Colby's last 14 days as a dialogue between these men who are doubting and who are in grief and who are like who have no faith in God at all, um, with a saint entering in, voluntarily entering into that to sort of pastor them through those questions, sort of similar to how it felt like he was doing that for me. And eventually they decided to go for the idea, and I had done quite a few video commercial type projects, even some narrative short films that were like branded content. And so I went ahead and like wrote the script. It was like beautiful script, and a lot of people were really like moved by it. And so decided to go ahead and start casting it, directed it, and it was on set while we were there for this short film. We were shooting in a barn in Texas. We were like, couldn't find a concrete bunker, so we went ahead and shot in a barn. What all we really needed was a room anyway, and it worked. It's low budget, but it was really beautiful. And while we were shooting it, there was these moments where it really felt like heaven was touching earth. It was just like the veil was being torn open, and right before our eyes, just for the small cast and crew, um, we were getting to witness heaven like entering into the world, um, and uh, that's perhaps the best I could describe it. It was shocking, like the spiritual um, like flame that was burning in that space, and um, I realized that I had a gifting or an anointing to be able to um, help actors to find uh, layers down, like in their very selves, like their connection to the story and to this sort of spiritual idea that a scene was written to articulate. um, I just remember a particular moment when I was trying to get the actor that was playing Maximilian Kolbe to help this young man Albert, like, to put away an implement that he was using to try and kill himself. And um, the like basically like helping to get this actor to fully express in a like completely vulnerable way what it would be like for a father to be cherishing his son, and like pleading for his son to sort of hold on to hope in the midst of that moment. In the way that it felt like Coley was doing that for me, like in my own kind of dark night of the soul. And I gave a few notes that sort of like snapped him into the space, and all of a sudden, like this like spiritual tidal wave is like unleashed through the performance. And it was like I think all of us who were standing around who saw it happen were like looked at each other and just were like, this is sacred ground. Like we wanted to take off our shoes, and we knew that there was something there bigger, in terms of like a bigger story to be told. And that experience happened when we showed it at the event, and it felt like a tidal wave. If you've ever been in a room where like a spiritual atomic bomb goes off and people are just like disoriented and they don't even know like where they are anymore. Like it was kind of like that. And so all that to say, I was gnawing on it in the background, and I knew like this little team that we had put together to make this had something really special to say with a bigger project. At the time, I think my big question was just like, who the heck is going to give me somebody who's never directed a movie before, like, hundreds of thousands of dollars, like basically asking somebody to buy me a house. um how would I ever get somebody to trust me with that kind of money? And it turned out to be the case that the Catholic world is a lot more generous and um, like willing to invest in things that has God's sort of hand on it. And people, like business people in Dallas, could really see that and decided to help me out in an incredible outflow of generosity. We raised the money as within 5 months of me starting asking for it, which was just like unbelievable. Um, and so yeah, we found ourselves in Poland shortly after that, with no no idea who we were going to talk to about doing it, how to navigate the language. Any contacts in the film industry is like, you know, one of the craziest things I've ever done in my life. But we went out there, and then 3 months later, we 4 months later, we came back with a movie.
It's wild. There's so many thoughts I have. We'll even see what I can recall. That you answered several questions I had, and one of them was like this renewed faith you had. Um, how did that play out on set? Now I know you were speaking sort of to that short before the actual feature, but still, um, it's amazing. You say that you basically felt the spirit there, and I related to that because I had a I felt called to film for a long time, um, and I remember being in theaters has always been incredibly like cathartic, very psycho emotionally powerful for me. Like I was very picky with what movies I went to see because they would impact me on like such a almost a ridiculous level. And there was one movie I was watching. It was a Christian film I remember in theaters, and I was going through some personal stuff, and this was 10 years ago or something. And I was praying in the theater, and I felt uh, something like you described. It was God reaching out to me in this place that um, my heart and my mind were just always opened in the theater, and I it was like a hole opened above me, and I felt the presence of God. And like immediately, I have like my eyes fill with tears, um, and I remember he showed me how the reality of his existence. And I remember I'm like, I don't, what the heck's happening right now. I'm just trying to watch a movie. I have a struggle going on in my early 20s. Again, like I think a lot of people do, and significant struggles. But um, I remember thinking, okay, I feel his reality of his existence. Let me try to doubt him right now. Like I want to actively try because I think just to test this, and I could not doubt him. And I thought, let me remember this feeling because there's gonna be a time when I'm not gonna remember how I feel right now, but I want to remember the fact that I tried to doubt him and I couldn't, and I couldn't doubt him, and that stuck with me. Um, through other dark periods is, um, I think Mother Teresa kind of went through something similar where even in Dark Night of the Soul, she recalled back to these moments of like, no, I know he's real. I know he's touched me in these moments, even if I can't feel him now. And I think it's interesting that he was so present when you're making just even that you're in that, barn. Um, there's so many things to say there. I think people do not consider the power of the spirit in something as significant as filmmaking, because your imagination, the viewer's imagination, is totally open, and I think that's why Satan attacks it so fiercely and why he has such a grip on it. Is
Yeah.
it's profoundly impactful for people, um, and if we call on him like you did in your crew, he can. And I think the Passion of the Christ. This was clear too that it happened there. That he can elevate performances by his grace, and it's at a heavenly level that we can never hope to achieve.
Right. Yeah. One of the interesting things about film that's different than theater is that with theater things have to be bigger than reality because um it's not quite as immersive, and you have to sort of see it from afar. It's not trying to literally duplicate reality because that doesn't work for that medium. Whereas film, it gets closer to realism because you can get really close up on a an actor's face and see something as simple as like a tear sort of like just sort of dropping from their eye. And the subtlety of that emotion feels incredibly immersive because of how realistic it is. Whereas, the sort of waterworks that can happen when you're in a theatrical play, um, while also compelling in a different way, um, don't quite have the same sort of like personal, hacking your whole sort of nervous system to install there a feeling or an experience. And so yeah, it's incredibly powerful, and of course like it's become a tool of the enemy for sort of hacking the cultural subconscious and installing like lots of terrible software that's very opposed to Christianity, which I think is part of why it's so important for us to like take on this medium in a new way, and why I think our film, in some strange synchronous way, Kolbe was perhaps the first saint to say we should make movies. And before World War II, he was planning on like starting a film studio. Like this guy was way, way before his time. And he was seeing like how powerful of propaganda like the fascists and communists and Freemasons were able to sort of create, and was like righteously indignant about that and wanted to sort of take on mass media for Our Lady. So anyway, like it's just amazing that now uh, his story is becoming like a watershed moment for Catholic film because um, to this point, yes, there have been other Catholic films made for sure. It's not like this is the first time somebody's making a really like ambitious saint project. But what's really unique about it is that this is the first time that it's completely home baked. Like this is not coming out of like the studio system. There's not like a um, oftentimes the way that these are made, because they're so expensive, there's a billionaire that wants to sort of honor a saint or honor, Fatima or something that they have a devotion to. Um, and yeah, they like have this sort of uh, they'll have this sense where um, they'll hire a director that is reputable, that but is probably atheist, and sometimes that can work out. The Mission was one of these sort of success stories where they paired a really really like a billionaire that wanted to make something Christian with an atheist director, and you actually had some magic happen. But um, like I don't think that that's like the model for how the Catholic Church should tell its own story. Like, it should be people who've grown up in our environment, who have understood and sort of been through the crucible of our formation, that are telling that are entrusted with telling the stories of our saints. And so like I was steeped in Catholic imagination, but I'm a nobody. I'm not coming out of Hollywood. I'm not coming out of like a like having been formed and shaped by that world. And so there was an ability for us and our team to be able to do this, like, and reinvent every part of the process of how a film could be made, to utilize like the global network of the church to sort of make something that was way better than should have been made for our budget. And so yeah, when this comes out, I think that it's going to like give people a window into the experience that we had on set, that was this like profound experience of God's presence through the icon of a saint. Um, and it's going to start, I think, a chain reaction of lots of other Catholics seeing, one, this can be done, like being encouraged, like we could do this, we can do more of this, and two, like a sense of like a standard for like what Catholic art can be, what Catholic filmmaking can look like. And so, yeah, like we don't always have to be sort of deeply disappointed by films that purport to tell the story of a saint because they're either cheesy and are low production quality, or on the other hand, just don't capture the actual heart of the saint, which have been like the struggles I think a lot of us have had over and over again, just being disappointed by things that like come through. So all that to say, um, I think that this is going to be a really big moment for demonstrating how this medium can be used by the Catholic Church.
So we're gonna excuse me. We're gonna break this interview in half. We had something come up. We're going to on our end come back at another time and conclude this conversation. But where this is a great point, I think, to pick up on is because this is I think this is the you're trailblazing, like you said, and this is going to be vital. I think. I think that the film industry is so corrupt and steeped in the most diabolical sin that it is. I think it's on. It's going to collapse. It's a sinking ship, and I think that Catholics, like you said, everyday Catholics. This is the Lord uses the you know the ordinary
Right.
and makes extraordinary things. uh, we have to develop a new way to make films, and we can't give up on the medium. We have to utilize it. It's incredibly powerful. It can be incredibly good. And when we come back, I'd love to dive into that a little bit deeper and get at what's Hollywood doing wrong and what can Catholics do right.
I can't wait for part two. That's going to be such a fun conversation.
Okay, so it's been there's obviously been a change. We had a little bit of time. The first half of the interview we had to split up because you actually had some timely business regarding I think it was post production of Triumph or something like that. And so we're back now to continue the conversation. Thanks for being with me again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so if I'm not mistaken, where we had left off was talking about the degradation of story in Hollywood. So I'd love to get your broad take on where it's at and how um, the way that you approached funding and actually producing this film. How is that different, or do you feel like you're forging a new path? Broad strokes. What's your take on all this?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things that I think is really that I talk about a lot, and stop me if I shared any of this before, but I think that Catholicism has always been a story based faith. You know, our faith uh, was shared through the story of the gospel primarily, and God came in order to tell the story of the gospel with his life. And God has always spoken to his people through story. The story of Catholicism, the story of the gospel. These things are the things that really spread the faith. And there's a reason for that, which is that human beings, we post enlightenment, we kind of see knowledge, abstract knowledge, as being very important, but the actual truth is that our brains are hardwired to remember stories. We are given our values, we are taught about the world through stories. And this has been the way that humans have worked since we emerged from the primordial forests, sitting around the campfire, sharing stories about our myths and our legends. We learn and remember that way. And the church is always really focused on being able to tell the story of the gospel through immersive experiences, whatever the medium is that is kind of the vernacular of the time. Stained glass windows, like frescoes, the story of the gospel being superimposed over the entire ceiling of a church. Like, this was how we taught the gospel to the illiterate, ritual and story. And so modern people experience culture and immersive storytelling through cinema Video games is perhaps like the closest second to that, but cinema is still kind of the modern cathedral. And as people enter into a story, whether it's in a theater or even just like streaming in their own home theaters, they are imbibing the culture in whatever way whoever is telling it. And unfortunately, uh, the church and perhaps just like her allies have moved towards direct education and like sort of cognition, the hacking of minds through education and through politics as the main way that we have invested in sharing the gospel, like apologetics, books, publishing, speaking, lessons, talks, talking heads. This is what we're used to. This is where we have put all of our chips. And the sort of culture at large, whether it's because of the amount of money that it takes to make film or whatever, they they've put all of their chips in being further upstream. Like cinema, storytelling, art, creativity, things that push culture forward. That's where the I guess those who have wanted to affect modern culture have sort of staked their ground and have won that ground. And the problem now is that unfortunately the culture and sort of the ideas that underpin that world, and I don't want to be really judgmental in how I'm talking about it, but just the underpinning ideals of Hollywood right now are propaganda in the same way that Christian storytelling, as we have known it in many evangelical films that have come out that have been really like saccharine and disappointing, all of that uh, is disappointing, I think, mostly because it's got an idea that it's trying to shove down the throats of whoever is watching this story. And once you get into that world where you're no longer interested in exploring reality and the mystery of it, but you're trying to force an idea that is sort of a political agenda, you're now leaving the world of storytelling and you're entering into sort of a very saccharine two-dimensional world. And whatever they do, like Hollywood is sort of vapidly falling apart because of that. And whenever you see decay happening in an industry, it might start and look like a moral decay, but that always is followed by a actual decay, a material decay. And what we're seeing there is that the whole sort of movie industry is really falling apart. Nobody really knows what to do right now because streaming has sort of distributed films in a way that makes it very hard for theaters to kind of catch up. And social media has made it sort of has created this sort of race to the bottom where now people are watching 2-minute bite size, very two dimensional, like Hallmark everything type videos on social. And uh, you can't make any money through all of these things because there's a million greedy middlemen that are not wanting to change, and so they're all taking cuts of everything as you're like making the movie and getting it out there. And so no matter how much a sort of Christian person wants to make a movie and start a business to kind of take on Hollywood, they're basically going through a meat grinder of a decaying, decrepit, very uncreative industry where everything has been done the same way for 20 years and is really falling apart. So for us, we are trying to do something very inventive and very different at every single step of the way. And it's, because we're underpinned by a story of St. Maximilian Kolbe, who himself was incredibly creative. We're telling a creative story. We have values that are really fresh. And that's outputting in like an incredibly entrepreneurial way that we're making the film. And I can kind of talk more about that if you want to ask more questions, but I think that's a good place to sort of leave off and let you respond.
Well, I'm trying to think of this quote, and I don't know if it was from Glenn Beck or if he got it from somewhere else. And I've been trying to partially remember it while you were talking. And it's something like entertainment shapes values, um, values impact. What is it? Entertainment creates. The point is, without butchering it horribly, entertainment is where it starts, and that impacts culture, values, and ultimately the future. So I think it stuck out to me. I've heard the phrase, um, from the Catholic's perspective, that faith lives upstream from culture. And it's interesting you kind of said too that um, that's kind of where they've claimed, and the perversion, the corruption is flowing down into the culture, and they did kind of win that ground, and we have to we have to reclaim it. And I think that it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I've talked with um, I'm in a position where I speak with a lot of young Catholics who are really eager to go into the film industry, and they're just naive and they just don't know the reality. Um, and there's a relative who she's ready to with the college she's about to go to pursue film, and she's like, "What advice do you have?" And I don't know if I like destroyed her kind of enthusiasm, but I basically was like, the way that you're thinking about it. It's like it's a dying industry, and we need to be on the cusp of something new, and I think that companies like yours are kind of trailblazing in that way. So maybe you do kind of want to go into the path that you took in a little bit more detail.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of the things that we're doing are sort of just reapplying a different principle from a different industry or a different, like, we're doing things that have been done before, but doing them in the process of making a film that makes us able to be truly independent. And so I guess a good example of this would be when Angel Studios came out, they really broke a lot of ground in the conservative world because um, anybody that's trying to make film and enter into this industry, they have to think at really big scale. Like, you can't make movies for under what it costs to buy a house, and um, get raising that money when you don't have a clear path to distributing it is very difficult. Like, most movies are not made until they already have distribution sort of set out, and that's sort of what the studio system is. A studio is an organization that both like makes and then distributes and has this sort of clear through line from the making of their thing to the distributing of their thing. And it's very high risk. Of course, there's super high reward economically as well. You think of Disney, who sort of changed the world with his first animated film, Snow White. He was the first person to ever try to make an animated film that made people cry. Everything else before that was this slapstick, Mickey Mouse type thing. And of course, that was so culture shifting that it brought incredible amount of value and revenue and all of that. And every studio is sort of chasing that. But when Angel Studios came out, what they did was they made it possible for people to crowdfund films, and thus sort of future proofing it, saying there's definitely an audience for this. And then also, like, we're spreading out the responsibility of funding this across many people, thus sort of making it a lot easier to take the risk on a film. And that allows them to do conservative movies that are really outside of the studio system and all the tastemakers and doorkeepers that are out there. And so they've definitely solved like some problems and have paved some ground. And we took a note from that and did a very similar thing where we crowdfunded our film. We did a short movie and then shared that with people and got investors. We didn't use the same kind of tech that made that possible. It was kind of one-offs, but we still did it that way. And we wrote our script with a sense of a budget in mind. We looked at what Catholic movies have done, what conservative movies have done in the box office and in streaming, and then we're like, okay, most saint movies, they've been done with, they cost about $40 million to make. And if you think about how much money that is, it's like that is the budget of the entire Civil War, like that is incredible. That is an incredible sum of money to have to raise for somebody who's outside of the studio system. Only billionaires can do that.
And frankly, that's why almost all of the saint movies that have been made recently have all been like a billionaire who is retiring or dying wants to sort of give an homage to their favorite person. They sort of don't know the industry. They go out and hire a bunch of people. Most of them are atheists, and sometimes you get something really beautiful like The Mission, which was an anomaly. But most of the time, what you get is something that's really kind of like uh, really expensive, like I don't know, like letdown. And I think that like what we decided to do was we're going to write a story where we're only going to focus on a portion of Kolbe's life that we could actually do for $500,000. And even that is like an incredibly ambitious thing. And we picked Auschwitz. We picked sort of focusing on a part of his life where he's in the cell. And we wrote the script around like X amount of locations, like in X amount of costumes, like we have to write everything just totally focused on knowing that we can't do this for our budget at the time was like $300,000 is what we're thinking of doing. Ultimately, it went up to like 550. But all that to say, I think that when we decided to do that and we like went out to Poland and we're like, okay, we know that we can get World War II stuff cheaper in Poland, so we're just going to have to go out here and do it and figure it out. There's like a hustle to that, a missionary spirit, like a zeal that only comes from having this like unquenchable kind of thirst to say something true about the universe, something beautiful. That motivated our team to go out and just like suffer in a strange place, in a strange land, to sort of make this happen. And every step of the way, it's been kind of similar, where in editing the film, in getting the music done, and now even in distributing it, we're having to invent new ways to get the movie out there, or new ways to sort of make this happen. And I can go more into that, but we're literally like building technology that allows us now to crowdfund and do ticketing for the film industry, and we think that that will help not just us but many others who come down the road when they want to do group sales and figure out how to. I mean, an example of this is that theaters are all working with a very antiquated like technology system, and uh, you when you want to go to theaters, like all of these studios, they have deals with the theater that's like, all right, you give us the data from the tickets, and we're going to run ads against that, and we have to do this little back end thing where we integrate our ads to your back end, and they'll pay like $200,000 to do that. And for us, if we want to actually get theaters to put tickets on sale, um, we can't motivate them to do that at all, and we have no deadline from them and no assurance. They can say, we're going to give you 500 screens, but they will not put the tickets on sale literally maybe up to 5 days before the movie is actually going online. Now, why is that a business problem? It's a business problem for everybody, because that means tickets will not be sold. Why has that not been changed? Because they're still holding on to these back end deals with studios where they're getting like $200,000 a pop with these like things. But that's an old way of doing business that should have died in the 90s. Like that is not how this should work anymore. Technology has changed. You will sell a lot more tickets if you just solve this problem for everybody, but they have not. So we're literally building a process where we can crowdsource like ticket sales for locations, and then go out to the theaters and just book say we already sold all these tickets. We're just going to pay for all those seats, and then we're going to distribute those tickets to all the people. And it's a huge, huge logistical problem to try and figure out how to do that. If you think like, all right, we're about to sell and distribute 100,000 tickets, how do we do that? And not have it automated, because we're getting, every theater has a different ticketing system and a different process for how they do it. Like, it's a massive entrepreneurial problem, but we've figured out that we just have to solve that if we want this movie to be successful. So these are sort of like, you can't just be a filmmaker in the film industry if you want to be sort of Christian or making these sorts of innovative Catholic things. You have to be a artist and an entrepreneur, an artist and a general that's like going to war, and that is thinking about like the promulgation of their movie the same way that a general that's going into enemy lines is thinking about it. Like, you have to be really willing to stare death in the face. So that's sort of what we're all feeling right now.
Well, on one hand, that's really fun. Like just to forge that path sounds fun to me, and to have to problem solve like that. Conversely, it seemed like if there wasn't already enough, a greater barrier to entry. I know a bit about you and your brother and your company. I think you guys are skilled, and I think that part of why the Lord's put you into this is because you guys can forge that path and problem solve. But I think for a lot of the young Catholic uh, aspiring filmmakers, you're developing tools which can help. That's great. But how? I want to get a little bit later to maybe some advice, so maybe we can dive into it a bit later. But yeah, I was also thinking it's kind of amazing that movie theaters haven't like closed yet. Like I know they have been closing, um, but it is such an archaic system, and it's sad because there's nothing like experiencing a film in theaters. Um, so that's interesting too. I'm just curious how that's gonna like. Where is everything gonna land? What is your opinion on that? I think like coming through this, do you think theaters are gonna survive this revolution?
I uh That's a really hard question to answer. I think what I will say is that I think that um, they're going to become event spaces, not theaters. Um, and event spaces are going to become theaters. And there's going to be technology that sort of um, allows a filmmaker. Really, the big problem is scale. Like movies have to, in order for them to justify their budget, like $14 a pop, and if that's getting split up between the distributor, the producer, and the theater, and the theater is taking like 50% of that, then you only have maybe $3 or $4 a ticket that the producer is making for the movie. So if you think about like how many people have to buy a ticket in order for you to make your money back on a $40 million budget movie, like that is insane. It's an insane like uh it's an insane sort of scale that you have to think about. And in order to do that, in order for things to shift, I think it's going to become a lot more decentralized, where event spaces that have theatrical, like, auditoriums that are pretty high quality in terms of their sound and their visuals. I think they're going to it's going to be a little bit less like, oh yeah, we have to have Adobe or Dolby 5.1 sound. Although I think that's amazing and is like a huge deal, I think that is going to become less and less prominent as like a necessity for watching a movie. Like if you have stadium seating with really nice seats and a really bright, beautiful projector, like you're at least 90% there in terms of the value of what a theater is offering. And there's tons of spaces that have that. So I think eventually there's going to be sort of like an Airbnb type thing, that like platform that onlines a movie and distributes them to all of those spaces where they can like sell tickets, and it's all kind of tied up in one place. And yeah, that's what I see as being the thing that will happen. And then I think, theaters themselves are going to get a lot more creative with the sorts of things that they use their auditoriums for. And they're going to just be forced to be a lot more like play a lot more decentralized eventually. So yeah.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah. I can speak for myself that so where I used to live, there was a theater, 20 minutes away, and now it's about 50 minutes from me. And I have multiple children, and I'm trying to think like what's the film that would actually get me out, that like as opposed to just waiting for it to come and just watch it on the TV. And it's like maybe the next massive Avengers movie, and we're at this is a yeah, I think that's probably accurate. It just is like it has to be the side. I think this is kind of a side note that with Marvel, creating the bigger and bigger stakes that kind of broke the fourth wall insofar as you had crossovers from, it was like the crossovers of different movies, and then it was different movie universes, and then it's like the bar is raising for why I should come to the theater to be wowed. And that was got them a lot of money, but I actually think it's hurt in general because, yeah, unless you're Nolan or Disney, I don't think people are going to see movies that much.
Yeah, I mean, it's very true. I think what they're finding is that movies have to be either massive like spectacles, or they have to be really special to a cult following. And the funny thing is that a movie doesn't have to be a new movie to be a very like cult following type thing. Like you're now seeing how they're like, oh, now we're going to re-release Lord of the Rings in theaters. It's like actually genius idea because there's a cult following for that. And you will always have people who are like, I would love to go and see that in a actual movie theater. And so I think part of what I mean by like the sort of miscellaneizing or the eventizing of theater spaces and then the theatricalizing of event spaces, I think that's like, what's going to happen. And ultimately, I think that technology is going to make uh, movie experiences like more and more immersive in terms of like what you're able to get to in your own home. So I think that the difference between what's a movie I'm watching on streaming and what's a movie that I'm like going to a theater to watch is going to just get like bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And the things that are going to be in like I want to see that in person are all going to have to do with like really more of the ritual of it. I want to be with these other people watching this thing that's a big deal to us. And not many movies are going to, and not many films are going to sort of and like help get into that like world. I also think that movies themselves as a medium are going to be changing a lot. And I think, yeah, like video games are going to become much more cinematic and immersive themselves. And so yeah, augmented reality experiences and like virtual reality experiences are going to become like much more story driven. And I would like, my big dream as a company would be to create something that a company that is getting into those emergent technologies and experimenting with like, how do we tell stories with different mediums, but right now that's like so much farther out than what I can consider as a little sort of, Catholic guy making a $500,000 movie. Like, that's a whole different level of scale and yeah, right now we got to walk before we can run.
Well, but even saying that, like that helps open the door in the mind of I think a lot of aspiring filmmakers. Like even what you just said, okay, like there's something for people to start to chew on. I have to ask you too, because again, when you said that, I'm thinking of all the AI video that has like within the last 2 months exploded. Um, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that it's going to make a lot of things a lot cheaper. Um, and I'm not sure technology wise when or how this will be done, but I do think that like that what's going to end up happening is that you're going to hire actors to shoot scenes with film, and you're at the same time like you're going to sort of make it a lot cheaper by being able to like switch out costumes or fix like fix the movement of a camera or even like completely do VFX with AI. Like right now, those things are not at all useful. Like it, AI is useful as a pitching tool for concepting and then presenting like a pitch of a new story. But it's very you can only create vibes. You can't really create characters that like do things that you can control as a director, that's consistent throughout a scene. That is still very, very hard to get AI to do, and it's not very good at it. It can create one sort of unique new character per shot, really. And those things might look very lifelike, but it's very hard to get it to sort of navigate camera movement through a really like controlled universe the way that like directing a movie does. All that to say, I'm sure that that will change. I'm sure that that's going to become way more useful. However, AI is not, it's not very good at replicating anything with soul. You know, like it is an artificial thing. And so I think all these companies are thinking they're going to start making films with pure AI programmers, where even AI is like writing the scripts and stuff. And I even like Hallmark movies, I don't think are going to be very successful with doing that. Um, as Even though they make the same movie every single time, there's just something different about using the soul of a human being to create something. Whether it's an actor or a director or a writer, like this is the world of storytelling, and it's the world of the human soul and the human spirit. And AI can imitate it, but it can't like actually create it. Um, and so, yeah, I think it's just going to continue making everything online look like absolute garbage, like pretty garbage. And that's the way that the world has been. Like the whole Hollywood industry has been moving in that direction anyway. Like everything that they make is like a rearticulation of something else that they've made, but worse. And that's just like what AI is doing. It's like, wow, it's beautiful, it's super pretty, very visually impactful, but like has no guts to it. And I think when people watch our film, one of the things that they've consistently said is like, wow, this was way better than like insert, high
And
budget,
Padre Pio.
movie. Yeah, right. Like super high budget movie. And so much more entertaining and so much more interesting. And it's just like, you don't actually need fireworks. Like what you need is a really good script that's saying something that people have never like had to encounter or grasp, that's new. And then you need human beings that are just giving their heart and souls to making that thing like come alive, with amazing, incredibly heartfelt, very vulnerable acting, and like costumes and lighting that are really like cinematic. And the truth is those things are not actually all that expensive to do. Like, yeah, it is expensive, but really like the value of a really good story that hits a cultural moment much higher than $500,000. And so I think what we're going to see is like, and for me, I think on the next movie, we'll probably be able to do a lot more visual effects with AI than we could have done right now with the budget that we had. It'll still be like people sitting on computers, like actually animating stuff, but they'll be able to get like a head start that will save them 3 days of work to do something much more impressive than what we were doing, with just sort of like, hey, can you add a blood splatter here, or like make a bullet ricochet here, or remove the tennis shoes on this extra. Like that's really what VFX are able to do right now, and it's actually time consuming because they have to draw that object on every single frame to like mask it and follow the masking through and create like the depth of it. And I think AI is just going to make that a lot easier.
Yeah, I hate to say that I think that those animators' jobs are probably the most at risk as far as I can tell, because I think actors, directors, producers, I think like the crew is safe, exactly for what you're saying. But that's a good take. I agree with all of that. And also, while you were talking, I'm thinking, I think there's animated there's animated films that are out, and they're kind of a category of their own. I think that AI will probably become a category of its own. You'll watch an AI film uh, for that, knowing what it is, because it does feel empty, and it will never have soul to it. I think you're right. There's something intrinsic there. I think if there wasn't something intrinsic where people could, you know, if you couldn't differentiate between um, a man-made performance or an artificial performance, it would be like what's the point to anything? So that will always be set apart, but it will make the post-production a lot more efficient and pre-production a lot more efficient, um, and make movies more accessible to make. Um, and what I had you talked too about how AI can't actually create. I mean, it always needs a prompt of some kind, at least right now. Maybe when it hits the singularity, it'll be different. But right now, it always needs a prompt. So it just reminds me of, I mean, I'm not equivocating AI to evil inherently, but evil is also something that cannot create, it can only corrupt. So I think that there's going to be a huge propensity for evil to flow through AI created movies. But using it like you're going to do, using it in the right way as a tool and not as a creator, I think that's a good, again, I think that's a good path to follow for young creatives.
Yeah, if you want to get like a really sort of wonky take, like I think that AI is basically like a modern tech invented angel. Like it's a pure intellect that is not an intellect. But I do think that there's ultimately going to be like uh evil AI and angelic AI, like based on who makes them. And those things will end up like duking it out on like a spiritual level as like we and who aligns with what AI is going to sort of be like a tribal thing. Um, so yeah, I think that's a because these are going to become like super intellects, whether or not they're like actually self-conscious. It doesn't even need to be AGI for it to be like um a very powerful, almost supernatural force. Like us, the way that we outsource our thinking to these things, and we're already seeing that happening, is a like an incredibly concerning kind of movement in human like in humanity right now. And I do think that like the choice of which tool to use is going to become much more like integrated into like how we live and how we do life, and a part of like the processing of the moral consciousness of the world. And so anyway, I my hat is off to like Magisterium AI and those guys out there. Like Matthew Harvey Sanders is a friend of mine who um, is like really working very hard right now to actually create a Catholic AI, which almost like I almost want to spit those words out of my mouth when I'm saying it. Cause like anytime you think, oh, a Catholic version of a thing, it's like going to be worse. But the reality is we have to, like, it's not a question. We absolutely have to create AIs that are values aligned with us because they are going to become almost like the the consciousness of the world that people are dialoguing with ongoing. So yeah, I don't know how that like applies to film, but I do think that yeah, these tools are going to become so much grafted onto how we do life that they will be kind of a part of our personalities. So
Yeah. Well, AI is, I mean, it's pervasive, so I think it applies to everything. And so I think this is relevant. And that's a really, the, it being kind of like our human made angels or demons is, that's fascinating. I mean, we're made in the image and likeness of God. We have free will, so there is like a mirroring of divinity there. And like he made the angels, and we've created our own, yeah, an intellect almost. That's a really interesting take. Um, Speaking of evil, I know that it's kind of been famously, shared that on the set of The Passion of the Christ, they had demonic attacks. I remember a story, I believe, of it was either it might have been the music producer, and he was mixing it or something, and it kept erasing, and there was a lot of unexplainable tech issues. I'm curious, did you guys experience anything uh, similar while making Triumph?
all the time. I mean, even like 3 days ago, it was like, oh, I spent 3 weeks working on the trailer, and then all of a sudden I go to like export it, and all of the projects and every autosave is corrupted. Like,
There you go. Yeah.
like,
That
but
doesn't happen. That's not like a
like,
thing.
yeah, when we first the first edit of the movie was corrupted, which is like insane. Like we're talking about it takes a month just to organize and line up all of the footage with all of the audio. Most of the time when you're recording, especially with our set, we're recording with probably about 10 mics going at any given time. Every actor has a lapel. Then we have two booms, and uh, you're so all of that stuff is being recorded individually on individual tracks, and it has to be synced with the camera. And that's why they use the little clapper thing like at the beginning of every take, because that clap creates the spike in the audio that you line up with the visual of the thing, in case it doesn't automatically work correctly. All that to say, we imported all of that. We had an assistant editor putting it all together. It took her 2 months to do that, and then to like go through and actually create the first edit of the movie. And when she delivered it to us, there was a weird wonky thing happening with Premiere where all of the tracks could not be opened once you click. You could see it on the timeline, but when you double clicked into the track, it was the link between the actual file and whatever, I don't know, but it was all corrupted. The entire project was corrupted. Every single track was corrupted, and it just had to do with like how she had imported it. But we had to restart, and it was like, 2.5 months wasted. But the crazy thing was that there was like, in the process of restarting, you have like thousands and thousands and thousands of clips, and for some reason a few of them were imported into a few of the corrupted ones were imported into the movie. As we were like going through and re-editing the scenes, we didn't realize that it was corrupted at first, and so some of them made it in, and then like it was like trying to find a needle in the haystack because nothing would export, and we know like you had to click on every single audio track and every single video track to figure out which one was the corrupted one. And literally, like I'm telling you, and it's not just once you have it all assembled, now it's not just like 10 tracks, because you have one take from one thing where you have 10 tracks from that, and then you have another take from another like sort of camera where you have 10 tracks from that. And so now you have 20 audio tracks lined up in the same scene. And maybe you pulled in a different person's dialogue now from a different thing under it. So now you have 30 tracks. And so like when you're looking in the haystack for that, it is, I'm not going to cuss on your podcast, but it was a nightmare. So all of that is like the least dramatic thing. It's like the most annoying way that Satan was like involved. But I would say that in general, the hardest things have always been Satan trying to tear apart the culture of the team. When you are trying to do something that's this impossible, it requires everybody to be in total trust with each other, because if everyone is doing a million jobs and you're not able to sort of talk to each other all the time, and you can't like build consensus with every decision, you have to be able to trust that the production department is which is across the street, is doing their jobs, and they have your best interests in mind, and the camera department and like all of these things, they're all operating individually as teams, and they're all at like the total high level watermark of stress, fighting to sort of make the movie, get it done in terms of you have a certain amount of daylight, certain amount of time that and budget, and you have to get it done in that amount of time, and you have big problems happen, like a costume rips, and the costume department or the costume place that you rented it from is all the way down 2 hours away in a different city, and turns out that you're shooting that character like that day, and the backup costume had coffee spilled on it that morning, like stuff like that. It's so tiny, but you were just like, okay, what do we do? Because we're spending $10,000 right now while these 2 hours are like passing while we're waiting for them to come back. And all that to say, like the amount of stress that you're taking on is a place where fertile ground for Satan to get in and cause division, resentment, and confusion, and even just miscommunication. And all of that is what will destroy and sink a boat. And I think that throughout the whole project, that's been the kind of thing that we have had to sort of fight off and fend off spiritually more than anything else.
I guess that does make sense, that the human heart would be the main. You think technical first, like, oh, what kind of electrical issues did you have? But no, that makes sense. Yeah, that he's trying to tear the team apart.
I can give an example of that if you'd like.
Yeah,
Like, so there's a scene in our film where Kolbe and kind of the main character Albert have this intimate moment where they've woken up and all of the other prisoners are still asleep, and they Kolbe basically says like that he wishes that he could have smoked before he died. And it's kind of this funny like way that this other character is sort of salty and really jaded, sort of has a little bright moment where he playfully acts like he's lighting a cigarette and they like pretend to smoke together. And in the midst of that, this other character, Albert, like opens up and becomes vulnerable with Kolbe. And they have this like argument about God where Kolbe begins to sort of comfort him. And then Albert, this character, like closes off, shuts down, and like basically totally rejects Kolbe at the end of the scene. We wanted, it's like this really beautiful dialogue, really amazing scene where there's a lot of like changes and dynamics. And we had like, when we rehearsed this, it was like the amount of emotion that came out of both actors was just, it was like chilling, unbelievable. Like, and everybody was just ready for this to be, a center point scene that is going to win an Oscar, and we wanted to shoot it all in one take on a dolly. A dolly system is almost like a cart with tracks where you're pushing slowly forward for 10 minutes as they're all talking. And you can't make any mistakes, because if one mistake 7 minutes in and the whole thing has to get redone. And the actors only have like so many like lightning bolt rounds, I guess, of like emotion in them to utilize. Anyway,
You didn't make it easy on yourself, did you?
yeah, no. So we were shooting in this old prison cell that has lots of like warped wood under it, and we went and rented the cheapest dolly that like could be found in Warsaw, and I sent our camera team to go and pick that up, and they didn't get the proper equipment that they needed to like a dolly that I had no idea how much a dolly would weigh. And it turns out that it weighs like 700 pounds. So they have to go drive after we shot like a 14-hour day. They have to drive an hour to Warsaw to pick this up from this guy at like 1 a.m. And they have to pick up 700 pounds of equipment and put it in the back of this like, van. And this thing is rolling around in the back. Like, think about like something with wheels that weighs 700 pounds that's rolling around in the back. Like, it literally could have come forward and chopped their heads off as they were like, if they stopped too fast. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they're doing this on sleep deprivation or whatever. And this is like an example of my character defects as this sort of perfectionist that doesn't necessarily think that things are going to be as hard as they're going to be, and just sort of pushes the team to do stuff. So, we get it set up. We're like getting it going. It's like, and we put it all down, and we realize that the wobbly warpedness of the wood makes it so that the thing cannot go forward without bumping. So we had to then remove the tracks, remove the whole thing, and come up with a whole new like way that we're gonna like completely new idea for how we're gonna shoot this thing. And of course now the camera team is like super pissed because I made them do this for nothing. And now I'm sort of asking them to get creative with me and help bail me out because my plan didn't work, to come up with a new plan for how we're gonna shoot it. And the actors are all like, they're beautiful little vulnerable hearts are just starting to shrivel up because they sense all of this weird, awkward tension happening on screen. And we start trying to shoot the scene, and it's like they're constipated. The actors now cannot get any emotion in this scene. And it was just like a train wreck. And I had to basically like stop the shoot and get all of the, like, my camera department head, my like the producer, and myself, we had to have like a come to Jesus, like, what are we all feeling? Because something is wrong, And it just really all kind of started with resentment that had been built up because I, as the leader, could not actually just like put my head on the ground and be like, this is the only budget we have. Well, this is the amount of time we have. I'm being too ambitious. I cannot push the team to do things that are impossible, And when I was able to fully apologize for that and let everybody kind of vent it, then we could come back and all of a sudden we could shoot it and we got it done in one take, but with like different cameras and just kind of a different way that we had done it. But all that to say, if I hadn't had that like sense of humility to really see the problem that we're having now is actually a problem with me as a leader, that and my own kind of heart, needing to sort of come under the reality of God's goodness and what he wants, that whole thing would have fallen flat and it would have been a disaster. So yeah, that's where like Satan was kind of coming in into our project and really creating a lot of division.
Well, my next question was going to be, but you just answered it. It was going to be, how did you overcome these attacks? The answer is always humility. Of course, it's the one thing that the demonic cannot calculate. And so it's always it's always the way I know in my own life, in conflicts I've had, where it seems like me and this person, it's, normally a family member of some kind, and really getting stuck into this, where it's like the relationship is rapidly decaying over something that happened. And it's always been moments of like just raw humility, immediately clear the air and allow basically a resurrection of peace. Speaking of attacks, I want, and this is incredibly significant. This next question, I've been thinking a long time about. I'm curious what your answer to this will be. So speaking of attacks, there have been attacks lately on Kolbe and his legacy. We've seen this. I don't know where it originated, but I've seen it amongst traditional Catholics, and there's this growing movement that, in some people recognizing how I guess ethnic Jews or cultural Jews are involved in a lot of positions of power. People have become very very weary of them as a group. The pendulum swings back far the other way, and it's now becomes Nazi sympathizing. One result of this is the questioning of, and there's an individual online specifically, I don't even remember his name, so I can't even, I wouldn't name him, but I also can't. He's claiming he has history on his side. He has the documents in the personal writings of Kolbe, of church leaders, of leaders at the time of World War II, to back up the idea that Kolbe was not really at odds with Nazis, insofar as he was, I think, imprisoned, but he wasn't hated by them. He hated or despised Jews and Freemasons far more, and there was no story of a man who was going to be killed, and there was no scenario where Kolbe actually stepped up. It was fabricated. He died of myocarditis per Nazi medical records, and the church, whether through those who have infiltrated it, I'm imagining that they're referring to Freemasons and maybe Jews, have then coerced the Pope to believe the story and to make Kolbe a saint. I'm hyper generalizing, but all based on a lie. I'm so curious to know what you think of this, because again, the claims online are using a lot of supposed personal writings, medical records, and claiming this narrative is absolutely rock solid. Now, you've dove into his story more than, or better than most others. So you give me your take now, because I've heard that side, but what's the counter to this? Is there any legitimacy to these claims, or is that actually a lie, or a tool of Satan, maybe, to believe that kind of a narrative?
I mean, yeah, so I guess there's a few things there that can be. History is always a fickle and a mysterious thing, and like the way that you tell stories and the narrative that you weave from the stories or from the facts um, is can always be very interesting. And so one of the examples of this is like Kolbe, when the Nazis came to sort of take him in, um, he was he offered them tea, uh, offered them and gave them a tour of the gave them a tour of the whole sort of operation, treated them like honored guests, and at the sort of this strange thing, like it was like this total like they were like, yeah, let's go and watch, and they had tea, and then like they became like evil Nazis again, and then took him, you know, took him away, and of course, like he also housed and fed and hid 2,000 or 3,000 Jewish refugees in Yepikalanov um, during the sort of the Nazi invasion. And during that time, he also treated them with a lot of distinction and helped them to procure what they needed to celebrate Hanukkah and Jewish feasts. It's certainly the case that we have tons and tons of eyewitness testimony for how Kolbe was in Auschwitz, the sorts of things that he did for people, and the way that he was kind to people, the way that he responded to the Nazis with love. There was an incredible sort of openness in him to the Nazis, even though they were perpetrators of a great evil. Now, does that mean that he sympathized with them? No. I think that if you actually go to Poland and actually spend time with the friars out there and kind of imbibe the sort of collective memory of this person, it's just complete poppycock that he was a sort of a Nazi supporter or sympathizer. Now, there were a lot of things about the way that he thought that perhaps like you could weave a narrative around that. Like he was living in a time when Eastern Jewish momentum was very much involved in communism and Freemasonry. It's no question that a lot of the Jewish sort of movement at that time was towards an atheist worldview that was really advocating for a new Zion, a new country that was to be a very strong political movement at the time. And that was driven by people who were often kind of coming out of the Communist Party. And this is not to be anti-Jewish. It's just sort of to sort of note the political kind of moment that this was what was happening. And Kolbe was incredibly concerned about Freemasonry and communism, and what those things were sort of working in the gloom that was happening on Poland's western border. And so he was also very populist and nationalistic in his approach to politics in his own country. So he did speak very often about his disagreement with the Jews. He thought he was very open directly about Jews not being Christians and wanting to see them converted. And he also was said things probably that didn't age very well as it pertains to like his his skepticism of the Zionist movement. And I think that all that to say, those I think are very easy punching bags for making somebody into an anti-Semite, or if you're actually a Nazi yourself and want to sort of claim him as a hero of yours or something, you could probably find things in there that you could sort of like proof text the same way that when you look at scripture, you could sort of make it say anything you want because there's such a vast sort of mysterious like paradox in it. And Kolbe's life was very much a life of standing on the lines between things and not quite being able to be pinned down on any one of those. And therefore being able to have a lot of different allies and at the same time lots of different like enemies all across the same sort of like these sort of quadrants of Polish culture. So I don't know if that like eases it, but it's very obvious to me that uh, Kolbe's character and its heart go through all of the different eyewitness accounts of his life like doesn't fit with the story arc that this person is sort of promulgating. And I would also say like there are a lot of people that want to claim him or sort of disparage him as an anti-Semite to sort of tear down the statue of his impact on Poland. And I think that's also an incredibly like two-dimensional reading of his life through that sort of 20th century politics lens, or 21st century politics lens rather.
Yeah, I think I never understand why we need to be on one side or the other. I like his that kind of non-committal, we don't need to pick sides. Catholics are aligned to the truth and uh, to charity, and I think the idea that he helped house Jews was also against certain movements that Jews were involved in. And then was the man that he sacrificed himself, he took the place of, was he a Jew?
No, it was a lot of the people in Auschwitz at the time might have been Jewish, but they were not necessarily there because they were Jewish. A lot of them, the people who were in Auschwitz at the time, were Polish political prisoners. And this is also one of those narratives that's almost like a faux pas to talk about because, there's a sense of like this belongs to the Holocaust. Auschwitz belongs to the Holocaust. And if you were to say that it's not like a Holocaust movie, it's like you're in some way anti-Semitic. And there's just this like time of Auschwitz founding that also perpetrated lots of evil terror on the Polish people, qua Polish people. And they also like telling that story, I think, is also an important thing to do. And that doesn't take away from the evil that it was used for the Holocaust itself. So, yeah. But it sort of falls outside of a lot of like the modern narratives that you would want to tell or that people would want to claim for it. I've had many conservatives that come to me and are like, oh, this is such an important movie to sort of to help like shore up the alliance between like Catholicism and Judaism because of how much anti-Semitism is going on right now. I'm like, sort of, yeah, but like at the same time, like this movie also has a critical kind of eye towards one of the Jewish characters, and I'm not shying away from like the intense sort of atheism that was often present in the Eastern European Jews at the time. And that's not to say that it's like it's really hard to take the movie and make it be a political thing in any direction because really like that time was super messy, and Kolbe's life was like, it does not fit in any way into a clear political, like good guy, bad guy thing that's going on right now.
Yeah, I think that it just speaks to, what that idea of what a Catholic should be is we can still be critical, or the way you're handling it, even in the movies, we can still be critical of things, and at the end of the day, still love them or show love.
Yeah.
And he did.
And that was 100% how Kolbe was. Like he was a classic Polish like conservative guy. Like he made no bones about like criticizing everybody and calling everybody out, and at the same time has this like incredibly cozy, kind heart for all of them as well. The same people that he was criticizing and writing against in person, when they come across his threshold, he's got tea and crumpets and Polish like biscuits for them. Like that is one, it's Polish culture, but two, that is definitely Kolbe's character. And so you could see how everybody wants to claim him or reject him, which is kind of how everybody's instincts are with everybody right now. Like, what camp are you on? Are you on my camp or the other camp? And I got to be ready to either like pitchfork you or like invite you in to the highest sort of put you on my flag, like those are the two things. And just I don't know. I think that instinct is stupid, and life just isn't like that anyway. So yeah, but
Well, he was Christ-like. I mean that's what Christ did. He was calling everybody out, but he still died for them. So yeah, and the last my personal note on that narrative against Colby is, I find it immeasurably disturbing and destructive to, like, I believe the Vatican has been infiltrated. I think, of course, evil would want to get corrupt men in there, but you have to believe that the church is operating on truth, especially with saints. I just think, even if that were true, even if the whole narrative was true, and he didn't do the defining act, that catalyst for sainthood, um, like, it's a net negative to even address that, because we have to have faith in such a decision as sainthood. And the person who's sharing all of this also doesn't, he basically, his belief is, even if the church was uh you know uh consciously or unconsciously motivated to take part in a lie, he still believes that that elevation to sainthood is real. Which so the whole thing, to me, I get a bad feeling about it when you start to encroach towards the church in particular. We need to, like, stand our ground to some degree and leave that to God, even if that happened. And I'm so immeasurably skeptical that the Spirit would allow the church to operate on a lie like that.
I mean, I think that one of the things it is so flimsy if you just go to Poland. Like, so basically, like, why I'm saying this, there's an eyewitness from Auschwitz at the time who is an artist, and in Auschwitz, which is Auschwitz is like the town of Auschwitz. Um, there's a friary now that's really where like Kolbe's spirit is like most alive in the Franciscan friars right now. That's like where a lot of their innovation, their young people, their media branches, and they like this is sort of a classic. Like, this is what it looks like when the Holy Spirit is collaborating. Like, this would never happen in a place where the Holy Spirit is not like making people do some different stuff. They uh, they made a relationship with this artist who spent like his days um, making the basement of their church into a labyrinth of his tortured, like, sort of traumatic memories. He went through and made charcoal drawings on every surface of this basement, and it literally feels like a labyrinth. You could like get lost in it. It's pretty huge, and um, the story that sort of emerges from his subconscious is punctuated consistently by Kolbe uh, doing things for other people that reminded him of his humanity. Sort of the way that this works is you enter into it through a boxcar, and you have a roll call where all the walls are like lined up by these like terrified faces that are very human. And then as you progress into the labyrinth, all of those human faces become unidentifiable from each other. Each individual loses their humanity. And that's sort of what Auschwitz was supposed to do and was like. They shave everybody's heads, put them all in the uniform, give them numbers, but they're all completely devoid of like a human individuality. And the only person who is consistently depicted who retains their features is Saint Maximilian Kolbe. And you consistently see him like punctuating this whole thing, like holding a prisoner and like giving him soup or trading his bread or standing. There's this magnificent entire wall of a room where there's a dragon that's sort of coming down to eat like all of Polish culture, and you have all of Poland's like different literary heroes and heroes from all time that are about to be consumed by the dragon, and Kolbe is standing between the dragon and all of these like sort of Polish heroes. As the point is, like, when you're looking at this thing, immediately this is not propaganda. This is like a person who is in a dream state, like processing what God was doing through him, like how, like, basically Kolbe helped him to find his own humanity again, by being kind and not losing his own humanity throughout Auschwitz, right? And so, um, it it what his act did and how his presence was in Auschwitz is it is like embedded in the soul of this guy, and it's coming out through his fingertips. And nobody paid this guy to make this thing. Like, he had to make it. And I think there's just like um, this sense of who he was when you're talking to all the people that just becomes so clear. Like, this was not a man who was propped up by a propaganda branch to sort of do something, like, almost like how big how how the army industry maybe like hires somebody to write an autobiography of like a soldier to sort of make an agenda happen, like that whole thing. That is not what this was, and it's just obvious. Like, you're there, them, you see what this did. It's like, yeah, I don't know. Like, this feels like too much like just what what Kolbe would have done, knowing who he was and knowing all of the things that like people talked about him doing while he was in Auschwitz. Now, like, I can totally see how um you all of these stories, they become kind of biographical, and I am sure that there's a certain like compressing and two-dimensional like sort of dramatizing of it that has been created as it's been passed down through the oral tradition. But that oral tradition is absolutely like speaking truth about who Kolbe was and his presence. And I'm sure that, yeah, some of the details might be like sort of, I don't know, like not as clearly like this heroic, like one dimensional kind of moment. But certainly, like, this is in his character and this is how he was. No doubt.
Well, with all that being said, what do you hope? What's your biggest hope for what people take away from seeing your film on him?
I mean, I think that the icon of Kolbe that was created in that labyrinth is very much the icon that the movie carries. It's a it's when you are losing your own humanity, when you're losing your mind, and whether it's despair or uh, addiction or whatever darkness that is sort of gnawing at your soul, um, there really is a truth to, like, if you can look up and see the presence of somebody who is volunteered to be gnawed on the way that you are being gnawed on, and volunteered to take on all of your suffering, to just be beside you, to be with you in it, um, all of a sudden love breaks through and like immunizes your own heart to the evil that is sort of about to gobble it up. That is what Kolbe was for the Polish people at that time. And I think that story and that icon is so immensely powerful for anyone right now who has to face darkness in their own life. Like, this is what the Christian life of a hero looks like now in our modern time. And like, we in some way get to feel Kolbe's tenderness and his love for us, and um experience a little bit of what it might have been like to be saved, to be pulled out of like the darkness by that presence. And so that, I think, um the it's not even like a communication of an idea of hope. It's like a injection of hope into the soul. That is what this movie is, and how people experience it.
Mm, praise God. Now we're coming to a close. What advice do you want to leave with the aspiring Catholic filmmakers who I keep referencing? You think maybe especially those coming out of college right now. What's your one piece of like, this is this is the direction I'd send you in as you feel this calling to the film industry?
Um, if I could go back and give myself advice when I was graduating college, um, it would be something like, don't wait to let God dream through you. Like, I think that a lot of what has held me back in my life has just been um, a sort of a small thinkingness, a lack of hope for what God could do through me in the world, um, and a lack of confidence, I guess, in that. Um, and I think that an artist becomes an artist not because they're given permission to uh, or even resources to do things. It's they're already that, and they have to make the art. They just have to. There's no question. It's like, I will do this or I will die. And if you have that, then do it. If you do not have that, do not do it. Like, go and get a real estate license and start selling houses. Like, like it has to be that. Well, Siri wants to weigh in on this as well. No, it is like, it is so hard that if you are not being chosen by God and designed by God to do this, and you can't help but do it regardless of whether or not somebody gives you money, um that's where you need to be. And don't tell stories unless they are that level, like, for you. Like, it's got to be gnawing in your bones to get out, for it to be something like worth doing. Don't be like, I'm thinking about big explosions and, moments of like really melancholic, like dramatic kind of connection between the two characters. Or like, I think a lot of people sort of just, what they don't realize is that a good story starts with something that you have to work out in your own life as a necessity in order to, like, stay alive. It's like, and this is true whether it's a comedy or a tragedy or an Auschwitz movie or like something that's like a rom-com. Like, all of them, and if they're good, they have a depth to them that it was reached because the person who was meditating on those things was being drawn to the ninth circle of hell and then into the, like, the highest heavens through their meditation. That is what an artist should be doing, is descending into hell and then raising into heaven, and sort of opening up that path for other people. And I think that's what I would say is, like, don't be afraid of that journey. Go undergo that journey, and let the creation, the actual act of creation, be the thing that is your, like, altar that God blesses. And if you start that, those sacrifices, God will bless one. Whatever one kind of like raises up to heaven and incense to him, like, it is going to be earth shattering, and it's transformative for your own career and life. That's what it was like for me, but I was doing this before anybody sort of noticed and gave me a leg up.
That's it. I don't think there's a better answer to that. You hit right at the heart of it. Um, and I think the potential fruitfulness of injecting X, Y, and Z right into people's imaginations and hearts and souls is so valuable and so either beautiful or destructive that I absolutely echo that anyone interested should have that passion inherently within them. God will clear the way, kind of like he did for you. He will make it possible. You just have to be sure you're doing his will. Okay, where can people go to learn more about Triumph of the Heart, to support it, and to support you as you in your plan to continue to make this kind of content?
I mean, right now the main battle is this movie. Like, this is beachhead. If you want to see the industry change, uh, the best thing that you could possibly do is help make this movie successful, because everything that comes after this will look at this moment as a reference point. And I don't think that I'm being dramatic by saying that. Like, this is a completely new thing for the sort of the Catholic ecosystem. And if it's successful, we will get to have a myriad of things that come out of this. Think of all of your favorite saints, all of like the stories that you've ever always hoped that Hollywood would tell. Like, those will all be made possible as, Ascension Press or like OSV or EWTN all look at this and are like, oh, like they did it. They could make money. Like, maybe it's actually something that we could get involved with doing. And then they'll start putting money down to help other filmmakers make other ideas happen. And those filmmakers will look at what we did and be like, well, that's the new bar, all of that is like a positive flywheel that happens if you just show up and buy a freaking ticket. If you like wait for this to come out in streaming, like, shame on you, because I think everybody here knows at this point that, like, if we don't do something to sort of claim our own ground in media, like, we are dead. We're just giving all of our children to Molech and being like, here, take them, please. Like, and all you have to do is just like schedule September 12th when the movie comes out. Just vote by buying a ticket. I know it's hard. I know it's like everybody's busy, but like, buy a ticket, tell your friends, because showing up to this moment culturally is going to make a whole host of things happen beyond. And if you don't vote like with your, with your shoes and with your wallet, there's a real potential that this could be kind of the last of its kind, like a dying wheeze of a Catholic effort to sort of take a second renaissance and get a second wind, So it is really on you guys now, and on Catholic kind of culture to decide if it wants to sort of get behind its own people. We're charging forward, and whether or not people come is kind of going to determine whether or not the battle is won.
Lord knows that
So,
you've suffered for it
mhm.
extensively.
Yeah.
That to me is confidence enough that this will be fruitful and a success, and that it is going to further the kingdom of heaven on earth. I'll be, of course, doing everything I can to get a ticket and to view it. And I personally thank you, because I've been drawn to film my whole life. I thank you for the efforts that you guys are doing. I will pray for you, and I thank you also for your time. You've given a good. I know you're busy, so I don't take this for granted, and I do hope to talk maybe again after it's out, and we can see what fruit is coming from it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited. This is a great conversation.
Thanks, Anthony. Thank you for taking the time to watch and listen to this conversation. If you enjoyed it, please like, follow, subscribe, all of those options, and share it with anyone who you think might enjoy this conversation as well. And finally, should you feel so called, I ask for any support that you can give. It allows me to continue having conversations like this to share with others, and be that a prayer, which is more than enough, or monetarily, I'm grateful for all of it. So again, thank you so much, and God bless.